Before we jump in, picture this. A quiet kid in a packed college room, a bold professor with a sharp tongue, and one moment that flips everything. This is liberal professor mocks Melania Trump. Barron's response stuns everyone. A story of guts and heart. Stay tuned. You won't see this coming. Like, share, and subscribe if it moves you. The New Orleans morning hung heavy with humidity, the air thick with the promise of heat. At Tulane University, Gibson Hall buzzed as students poured into room 204. The scent of chicory coffee drifted from mismatched mugs, blending with the chatter of kids in Saints caps and flip-flops. Barron Trump slipped in, his tall frame tucked under a black hoodie, cap pulled low over his sharp blue eyes. To them, he was, well, Barron, just another transfer student. He grabbed a seat in the fourth row, next to a guy with a wide grin and a southern drawl that rolled like the Mississippi. "Hey, you new?" the guy asked, leaning in. Barron nodded, voice low. "Yeah, just settling in." "Jake Landry," the guy said, offering a meaty hand. "Welcome to the show, Will." Barron shook it, quick and firm, forcing a faint smile. "Thanks," he muttered, scanning the room. The clink of mugs, the rustle of notebooks, it felt normal, a rare escape from the chaos of his name. A rumor floated among the students. Maggie once made a senator cry in this very room, and the buzz hinted at her legend. That peace shattered when the door banged open with a jolt. Professor Maggie Thibodeaux swept in, red curls bouncing like a wildfire, boots clicking on the hardwood. Her emerald eyes sparkled with mischief, and a sly smile played on her lips. "Morning, y'all," she called, her voice a warm, commanding drawl. "Today's about public image, how it's built, how it lies. Buckle up, 'cause we're diving in deep." She slammed her leather satchel on the podium, the sound cutting through the hum. Barron's fingers tapped his desk, a nervous rhythm. He joined his class to escape his family's shadow and think freely. But Maggie's tone, bold, almost taunting, sent a chill through him. "We're hitting big names today," she said, grinning slyly. "Guess who's first?" A girl up front chirped, "Beyoncé?" Maggie laughed, rich and throaty. "Nah, sugar, think White House." Jake leaned over, whispering, "She's going there, man. Hold on tight." Barron's jaw tightened, his eyes locked ahead. He felt it coming, a storm brewing, dark and heavy. Maggie paced, boots echoing like a drumbeat. "Image ain't just what you see, it's what's hidden. Ready?" The class nodded, leaning in, eager for the fireworks. Barron's pulse quickened, a dull thud in his chest. "First up, Melania Trump," she declared, pausing for effect. "The queen of silence. What's her deal?" Murmurs rippled through the room, some chuckling. Barron's hands clenched under the desk, knuckles whitening. This wasn't academic anymore. It was personal, a dagger aimed at his mother. Maggie Thibodeaux leaned into the podium, her red curls catching the light as she grinned like a cat with a secret. The lecture hall at Tulane thrummed with anticipation, the air thick with humidity and the faint tang of chicory coffee lingering from the morning rush. Students shifted in their seats, some scribbling notes, others whispering bets on how far she'd go. Barron Trump, or will Barron to them, sat rigid in the fourth row, his cap pulled low, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. Jake Landry sprawled beside him, one leg kicked out, smirking as Maggie's voice filled the room. "Let's talk Melania Trump," Maggie drawled, her southern twang dripping with mischief. "A woman who's mastered the art of saying nothing, while looking like $1,000,000. Y'all tell me, what's that worth in a world screaming for substance?" A ripple of laughter rolled through the class. A guy in the back called out, "Photo ops and fancy coats." Maggie snapped her fingers, pointing at him. "Exactly, Cher. She's a walking billboard for silence. That be best campaign. Sounds like a bad Google Translate job." The room erupted, hoots and claps bouncing off the walls. Barron's chest tightened, each word a jab he felt deep. He stared at the desk, tracing a scratch in the wood, memories flickering, his mother's quiet strength, the way she'd shield him from the cameras with a steady hand. Jake nudged him, grinning. "She's on fire today, huh? Your face says you ain't buying it, Will." Barron forced a shrug, his voice low. "Just listening, Doc." But inside, the spark from earlier flared hotter, a slow burn he couldn't shake. Maggie strutted across the front, boots clicking, her energy electric. "Take that jacket. I really don't care, do you?" she said, mimicking Melania's accent with a dramatic flair. "Wore it to a border camp, y'all. Tell me that ain't tone deaf." The class roared again, some nodding, others exchanging glances. A girl near the front raised her hand. "But wasn't it just fashion?" Maggie spun toward her, eyes gleaming. "Fashion? Honey, when you're first lady, every stitch is a statement." And that one screamed apathy louder than a Bourbon Street brass band. Barron's knuckles whitened as he dug his nails into the desk, hearing his mother's soft, accented voice in his mind, rise above the noise. This wasn't noise, it was a knife, twisted with every laugh from the room. Jake leaned in again, voice dropping. "Man, she's digging her own grave with this one. You sure you're good? You look like you're about to snap that pencil." Barron exhaled hard through his nose. "I'm fine," he muttered, but his eyes stayed locked on Maggie, tracking her every move. Dr. Clara Benoit watched from the sidelines, her arms crossed, her brow furrowing slightly. She noticed the kid in the hoodie. Well, was it? The way his posture stiffened with every jab Maggie threw. Something about him felt off. She scribbled a note on her pad, her pen pausing as Maggie ramped up the attack. "Let's be real," Maggie said, her voice rising, sharp as a blade. "Melania is the poster child for a bygone era. Stand pretty, stay quiet, let the man shine. Is that what we're selling to our daughters? A smile and a dress over a voice and a fight?" The class cheered, a wave of approval crashing through. Barron's breath hitched, his mind racing. He saw his mom in flashes, late nights helping him with homework, her fierce grip when the press swarmed, the way she'd whisper, "We're stronger than they know." Maggie didn't see that. She saw a caricature, a punching bag, and the room ate it up. A guy across the aisle muttered, "She's got a point," and Jake chuckled. "Told ya." "Well, Maggie, don't hold back." Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din. "Professor, maybe we should balance this. Look at her charity work, too." Maggie waved her off with a laugh. "Charity, don't erase the optics, Clara. This is about what she projects, or doesn't." Clara frowned, but backed off, her eyes flicking to Barron again. He met her gaze for a heartbeat, then looked away, his pulse hammering. Maggie clapped her hands, the sound of thunderclap. "So, y'all, what's the lesson? We prop up silence when it's wrapped in beauty, but strip that away, and what's left?" The question hung heavy, the room buzzing with energy. Barron's hands unclenched, then clenched again, the spark now aflame. He couldn't let this slide, not anymore. Jake glanced at him, brow raised. "You're sweating, man. What's up?" Barron's voice was steel, barely a whisper. "She doesn't know her. She doesn't know anything." The air crackled, the tension thick as the Louisiana heat outside. Maggie grinned, oblivious, ready for her next zinger. But Barron felt it, the tipping point, the moment he'd have to choose. Stay silent, or stand up. And as her voice rose again, he knew. This wasn't just a lecture. It was a line in the sand. The lecture hall at Tulane felt like a pressure cooker, the air buzzing with the heat of Maggie Thibodeaux's words and the restless energy of the students. Her red curls swayed as she leaned forward, her voice slicing through the room like a bayou wind. "Melania Trump's a relic, y'all," she proclaimed, hands on her hips. "A trophy wife who traded substance for stilettos. Tell me, what's the legacy of a woman who'd rather pose than speak?" Laughter erupted, sharp and loud, bouncing off the walls. Barron Trump sat frozen in the fourth row, his cap shadowing eyes that burned with a quiet fury. His hands, hidden beneath the desk, balled into fists so tight his knuckles cracked. Jake Landry lounged beside him, chuckling low. "She's tearing her apart. Huh, Will? Ain't no mercy today." Barron didn't respond, his breath shallow, his mind a storm of memories. His mother's steady voice cutting through the chaos of his childhood, her hands squeezing his during endless press scrums. Maggie didn't know that woman. She saw a punchline, and the room lapped it up. A girl up front shouted, "She's just a prop." Maggie snapped her fingers, grinning wide. "Bingo, Cher. A prop with a pulse." And were the fools cheering on? The noise swelled, a chorus of agreement and amusement. Barron's chest heaved, the flame inside him roaring now, impossible to smother. He glanced at Dr. Clara Benoit, perched near the whiteboard, her arms crossed, her brow creased with something like unease. She tried to steer Maggie off this cliff, but the professor was a freight train, unstoppable, relentless. "Let's talk be best," Maggie said, her tone dripping sarcasm. A slogan so clumsy it's a cry for help. Did she even write it, or it just gnawed at some intern's draft? The class exploded again, hoots and hollers filling the space. Barron's limit snapped. He took a deep breath, slow and deliberate, then raised his hand, steady, unshaking. The room didn't notice at first, too caught in Maggie's rhythm. But Clara did. Her eyes locked on him, widening slightly. Maggie paused mid-sentence, her grin faltering as she spotted him. Well, she drawled, crossing her arms. "Got something to say back there?" The chatter died fast, every head swiveling toward him. Jake straightened, muttering, "Oh, shit, we're doing this?" Barron stood, his movements smooth, his tall frame unfolding with a quiet grace that demanded attention. The hoodie and cap couldn't hide the steel in his posture now. Silence fell, thick and heavy, the air crackling with curiosity. "Yeah," he said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "I think you're missing something big, Professor." Gasps rippled through the room. Maggie blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quick. "All right, then," she said, tilting her head. "Enlighten us, Cher. What am I missing?" He stepped forward, just enough to claim the space, his gaze locked on her. "You're talking about my mom like she's a cartoon," he said, each word measured, heavy with truth. "But you don't know her. You don't know what she's been through." The room froze, a collective inhale, sucking the air dry. Jake's jaw dropped, his whisper barely audible. "Holy hell, Will, you're a kid?" Maggie's smirk vanished, her eyes narrowing as the weight of his words sank in. Barron didn't flinch. "She grew up with nothing in Slovenia," he went on, his voice steady, rising with conviction. "A small town, a family scrapping by. She fought her way up, modeled, learned 5 languages, stood by my dad through hell. And yeah, she's quiet. But that's not weakness. That's strength. Choose sin when to speak, not just run in your mouth." The class sat stunned, some shifting uncomfortably, others leaning in, riveted. Maggie opened her mouth, her hand twitching as if to cut him off, but Barron pressed on, unstoppable now. "You mock her jacket, her campaign, fine. But you ever think what it's like? Every move judged, every word twisted, cameras in your face every damn day. She's not a prop. She's a person. And you're tearing her down 'cause it's easy." His voice cracked slightly, raw emotion slipping through, and the room felt it, a punch to the gut. Clara stepped closer, her pen still, her eyes wide with something like respect. A guy in the back muttered, "He's got guts." Maggie crossed her arms tighter, her bravado flickering. "Fair point," she said, her tone clipped. "But public figures sign up for scrutiny. That's the game." Barron shook his head firm. "Scrutiny's one thing. Mockery's another. You're not teaching. You're bullying." The silence stretched, taut and electric. Jake stared at Barron, slack-jawed, then whispered, "Man, you just flipped the script." A few students nodded, murmurs starting to build. Maggie's jaw tightened, but she didn't fire back. Not yet. Barron stood tall, the quiet kid no more, his words a thunderclap still echoing. And as Barron sat down, a phone in the back clicked. The spark was about to catch fire. The silence in Tulane's room 204 hung like a held breath, Barron Trump's words a thunderclap still reverberating. Maggie Thibodeaux gripped the podium, her red curls motionless, her usual fire dimmed by the shock of his stand. Barron sank into his seat, cap shadowing his eyes, but his shoulders stayed taut, a coiled spring ready to snap. Jake Landry gawked, then leaned in, voice hushed. "Holy crap. Well, you're her son?" "Barron Trump." Barron gave a curt nod, his gaze locked on the desk, fingers tracing a scratch as if it could anchor him. The room ignited, whispers exploding into a chaotic roar. Trump's kid, a girl in front gasped wide-eyed. No freaking way, a guy muttered, pulling out his phone. Maggie clapped once, the sound sharp as a whip. Enough, y'all, she snapped, her southern drawl tight with strain. We're moving on. This ain't a gossip mill. But Dr. Clara Benoit stepped forward, her tone calm yet firm. Professor, maybe we pause? Let this settle. Maggie shot her a glare, fierce and unyielding. Settle? Clara, this is a lecture, not a damn therapy session. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the pressure. The class was hers no more. Students twisted in their seats, phones flashing, thumbs racing across screens. Jake nudged Barron, grinning. They're recording, man. You're about to blow up X. You know that, right? Barron's jaw clenched, a flicker of dread cutting through his resolve. I didn't want a spotlight, he muttered, low and rough. He'd spoken for his mom, not for fame, but the genie was out now. Within minutes, a guy in the back yelped. It's online already. Tulane kid defends Melania. Check this. The room erupted, laughter and gasps colliding like a storm breaking. Maggie's face tightened, her boots clicking as she paced. Put those phones down, she barked, her authority slipping. Too late. The shaky video, shot from a back row, raced across campus, hitting Café Du Monde by noon. Students huddled over powdered beignet, replaying Barron's voice. She's not a prop. She's a person. Jake scrolled his phone, eyes bright. Bro, you're trending. Hashtag Tulane takedown. They're loving it. He shoved the screen at Barron. Comments piling up. Kids got guts. Maggie got schooled. Who is this guy? Barron pushed it away, voice clipped. I didn't ask for this. Jake's grin faded, his tone softening. Yeah, but you stood up, man. That's real. Takes balls to call her out like that. Barron exhaled, nodding once. But his eyes darkened, the weight of exposure sinking deep into his bones. The ripple spread fast. At a bar on Freret Street, grad students leaned over beers, voices rising. Maggie went too far, one said, tipping his glass. Come on, he's a Trump. He's fair game. Another shot back, smirking. On X, the clip racked up thousands of views, splitting the crowd. Some cheered Barron's courage, others sneered at his privilege. Back in Gibson Hall, Clara caught Maggie in the hall, her voice low but pointed. You push him hard out there. Too hard, maybe. Maggie stopped short, her bravado cracking. He's a student, Clara, signed up for this class. Not my fault he's her kid. Clara crossed her arms, unflinching. You saw his face, Maggie. That wasn't about winning an argument. That was personal, raw. You didn't just challenge him. You cut him. Maggie stared at her, then looked away, fingers tapping her satchel nervously. I don't back down, she muttered, but her voice wavered, a rare tremor of doubt. Clara pressed gently. Maybe it's not about backing down. Maybe it's about hearing him out. Maggie didn't answer, her boots echoing as she strode off, her mind replaying Barron's accusation. You're not teaching, you're bullying. By dusk, Tulane buzzed like a kicked hive. Under the oaks, a girl in a Saints jersey waved her phone. He's right. She's human. A guy shot back. Maggie's just keeping it real. Barron slipped out a side door, hoodie up, dodging the stairs, now trailing him. Jake caught up, clapping his shoulder. You okay, man? You stirred up a damn hornet's nest. Barron forced a half-smile, weary. Didn't mean to. Just had to say it. Jake nodded, serious now. I get it. Family's family. You don't let that slide. The storm wasn't slowing. On X, a local reporter tweeted, Tulane showdown. Trump's son versus fiery prof. Who's got your vote? Likes flooded in, the clip edging toward viral. In his dorm, Barron muttered to himself, I hope she heard me. The quiet wasn't peace, it was a weight. Maggie sat alone in her office, scrolling the comments, her confident mask slipping. Clara's words gnawed at her, Barron's louder still. Something had shifted in the room, in her, in everyone, and it was far from over. A week later, the lecture hall at Tulane felt quieter, the buzz softer after the hashtag Tulane takedown storm. Barron Trump sat in the fourth row, cap low, hoodie up, eyes on his desk. Jake Landry slid in beside him, grinning. Round two, man. Place feels tense. Barron shrugged. Just listening. Maggie Thibodeaux walked in, her red curls tame, boots soft on the floor. The room hushed. "Mornin', y'all," she said, her drawl gentle. "Last week was something to—" She paused, looking at Barron. "Someone called me out, and I didn't like it." The air tightened. Jake whispered, "She's rattled, bro." Maggie gripped the podium, her voice catching. "I crossed the line, mocked a woman I don't know. That ain't teaching." Gasps rippled. She met Barron's gaze. "Thanks, Cher. Took guts." Barron nodded, a flicker of relief in his chest. Dr. Clara Benoit smiled faintly from the side. A girl asked, "So you were wrong?" Maggie chuckled. "I was human, sugar. We learn." She shifted. "Today it's empathy, not just tearing down." The class softened, students glancing at Barron, the quiet spark. "Clara, approach him after. You changed this room." He shrugged. "Just spoke." She nodded. "That's enough." Outside, Jake grinned. "You made her human, man. That's bigger than a legend." Barron shook his head. "Just a son." Maggie lingered alone. Barron's words, "She's a person," echoing. She'd learned too. Compassion takes strength. Did this story hit you right in the heart? Smash that like, share it with your crew, subscribe for more, and drop a comment. Let's keep the fire burning.